Good evening, Western Standard viewers, and welcome to Hannaford, a weekly politics show of the Western Standard. It is Thursday, May the 29th. The story this week is that there are graphic novels with explicit sexual depictions in Alberta elementary school libraries. Now, we're not putting anything on the screen, but trust me, we're not talking about pinups. We're talking about well-drawn fantasies depicting teenagers in sexual activity and in some cases with adults, both gay and straight, and the provincial government wants to know what Albertans think about it. There is a survey that you can answer, and if you want to see what we're talking about, you can preview these images when you take that survey. With me today in the Western Standard's John Galt studio is John Hilton O'Brien, the Executive Director of Parents for Choice in Education. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Nigel.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's good to see you. Now, John, you've been, this frankly seems incredible that there would be pornographic material in elementary school libraries. When you were at school, when I was at school, anybody who'd ever tried to pull off anything like that would have fired me, even have gone to jail. Something has obviously changed. But can you give us some scope of the problem? Like, what exactly are we talking about? Are these comic books, graphic novels? And how many are there? And let's then talk about who's the gatekeeper in the system.
All right.
Go ahead. Tell us about it.
First of all, it's not just graphic novels. There are other books that are at least verbally revealing. And what a graphic novel is, it's like a comic book, but where a comic book serializes things over several issues, a graphic novel combines it all together to make one complete story. Usually, the qualities are better. It's better bound. The art is usually better in a graphic novel as well.
So, again, is this all over the place?
It seems largely so. So what happened is a couple of years ago, a group of volunteers that are affiliated with Parents for Choice in Education that call themselves the Sidewalk Education Gang started doing some research because we knew that these books were available. We had anecdotes about them in schools. So they decided to see if they could prove it. And they amassed a file with quite a number of references where they could pinpoint exactly where a given book was in a library and say, this is really here, in some cases with photos of it on the shelf. Last fall, a lot of this information made its way to the Ministry of Education. The minister, of course, can't take any of this for granted, so he had the department go check into it. And they say in a number of cases, I think it's 46, they found that there were, in fact, a book like this, and I'd hesitate to use the name pornographic, but at least explicit, graphically sexual material was in a real school library in grades K to 9. And they were particularly concerned about its access to children as young as first grade, which is as young as 5 years old.
So you're saying that in the 46 instances that they were able to check, which is not in, 1,000 schools in Alberta, this is not an exhaustive survey, this is a sampling. When they sampled, they found 46 books in elementary school libraries.
Right. And they took that as a sign that perhaps we need to have some sort of policy that helps you decide as a librarian when a book is or is not appropriate for your school library.
Now, I think probably some viewers are still reeling with the what we're saying here because it does seem so unbelievable. Can you just, what sort of titles do these books have? And without getting into graphic detail, so to speak, what are they about?
There's books like Gender, Queer, or Flamer. I believe the department identified 10 particular graphic novels they were concerned with. And these are framed as coming-of-age stories, but the way they're done up lays heavy emphasis on the sexual aspect of it. And there's a concern that due to what the author notices, we're talking about things that are really focusing the reader's attention on the sexuality. And of course, in ethical criticism in literature, you can never omit the context, that these are done in the context of trying to promote alternative sexual and gender minorities.
Okay. Who would promote that sexualization of children who could also get it past the library gatekeepers? I mean, I would think that if you want to put a book in a school library, first of all, it's not your decision. It's the decision of the librarian or a committee or somebody, but not you. I mean, how do books get into libraries, and how did this slip past the screen?
Well, federal and provincial governments have paid substantial grant monies to advocacy organizations that are looking to normalize sexual and gender minorities.
Is this Heritage Canada?
Amongst others, yes.
So this is where Stephen Guilbeault has just ended up.
Yes, I suppose it would be.
It is, yes. Okay.
I had not made the connection myself. But in any case, teachers' associations get very much into the act across Canada. This is not just an Alberta problem by any means. And so if you look, say, at the PRISM toolkit for this that the ATA puts out, you have a note there from Senator Christopher Wells that mentions how he made a book that's available online on how to create, how did he put it? It was an inclusive library. And so the ATA encourages teachers to form committees for diversity, equity, and human rights, I think they call them. And those are expected to press for what they call inclusive materials in libraries, including these books. So there's quite a number of people who are working on getting these books into school libraries.
Well, you mentioned Senator Wells. For the benefit of viewers who may not be as familiar with him as we are, who is he?
Oh, Senator Wells was a very prominent advocate for sexual and gender minorities, did a lot of work in psychology, generally using survey methods to press the issue. And he's very famous as an activist.
He was appointed by which Prime Minister?
By Prime Minister Trudeau this past fall. He is one of Alberta's senators now.
And presumably this book that you refer to that he wrote before he became a senator.
Yes.
So that was actually, that was a positive when they were reviewing who they should make a...
Yes, I'm sure that's the case. The federal government seems to have had a great interest in this.
Well, that is interesting because although I don't know too many people of that persuasion, the few that I know just roll their eyes when they hear about this. They don't want any part of it. They don't want to be associated with it. They don't think these books should be in school libraries. I'm sure the parents aren't getting together to advocate for this. But we do have the federal government advocating for it.
Well, of course.
Well, what the hell is going on?
Well, the federal government does hope to be able to get enough influence to get votes. It's an opportunity for distributing political patronage through the grant system. And people who owe you for the grants they've received are always going to be on your side. They're always going to be your advocates.
Well, they could try advocating for something else, couldn't they?
You would think so. These books probably aren't a very good idea. Back in 2007, the American Psychological Association did a special task force on the sexualization of children. And they found that children who were prematurely sexualized, that is, exposed to the idea of people as sexual objects primarily, so people taken primarily as sexual interests, they found that these children would exhibit effects similar to actual sexual abuse. Very concerning negative outcomes across a variety of psychological domains. And they were studying the effects of media. And their conclusion was that media was not intense enough to produce these effects yet. But they weren't looking at schools. And in schools, when you put a book on a school library shelf, there's only so much space. You're taking something else off. It's a deliberate choice. And so material presented in a school and in a library has the stamp of authority. When they see this on the shelf, children are being told, this is how you should think. This is who you should be.
Or at least this is okay.
It's more than okay.
Yes.
There's a stamp of approval that amounts to teacher set. And it's a problem. When we look at things like the psychology of moral development, what we find is that there's some agreement that teenagers, both in their early teens, let alone children, and even in their late teens, are very much driven by what is socially acceptable. Convention matters to them. And so when we're putting this in that context, even if it didn't have official support, then they would be inclined to take this as morally right.
It's perhaps beyond the scope of this discussion to ask why the federal government would want to promote the sexualization of children. But is that a conclusion that we can honestly draw from the fact that you have a ministry within the government giving money to activists for, well, I guess they're mostly gay activists, but the books themselves seem to be gay and straight. So that's not wholly the issue. I'm looking to see what the public interest is in promoting the sexualization of children. Do you have a theory?
Okay. So this isn't really about promoting sexual and gender minorities in our view. The real problem here is that it is about being able to offer political patronage, which secures one's spot a bit in the firmament of Ottawa, as it were. The more grants and poorly sourced contracts you can put out, the more powerful you are because the more advocates you have. And that is probably what this is about. The fact that this is all related to promoting alternative sexual or gender ideas may in fact be largely beside the point. This is just a reason for promoting oneself or promoting the government's ability to give grants. What's really happening with all of this is we have bureaucrats and politicians who put up the image of someone who's vulnerable in some way, like a sexual or gender minority, and they exploit that for political power. There was an activist once upon a time called Saul Alinsky who criticized this as political pornography because you're exploiting the image of someone without power to get more power for yourself.
Well, he was recommending it.
Alinsky he was absolutely criticizing it.
He was a revolutionary of the 1960s. So wanted to tear everything down and restore it.
Mr. Alinsky is widely misunderstood, and he criticizes the left very harshly. He is not himself a leftist. And in fact, at one point, he's said to have worked as a union buster. So the fact that some of his disciples put it to different use is not Alinsky's problem.
What was his book?
He wrote two books, one of them called Reveille for Radicals and another called, something about
the Reveille.
The Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals.
And in fact, he was encouraged to write those books by a friend by the name of Jacques Maritain. Jacques Maritain was one of the architects of what's called the Christian Democratic Union, a conservative party in Europe.
Okay. We may hear from readers with a different view of Saul Alinsky's books, but I stand corrected if that's in fact what he was satirizing the left when he wrote Rules for Radicals. Let's get back onto the pornography thing. What is the provincial government looking to do?
The provincial government is just taking input right now, and what they seem to want to do is to help provide a framework by which school boards can decide what books are going into their libraries. make no mistake, there will still be arguments about books after this, and you will still see things like Catcher in the Rye. They're not going to be taking books off of school shelves, but they will be having a conversation about what's appropriate and what's not. Where is the line to be drawn? And they won't be doing that without talking to school boards and librarians either.
I just can't see what there is to discuss here, John. You have a graphic a graphic novel with a couple of teenagers depicted having sex, straight or gay, either way. That doesn't belong in an elementary school. I'm not saying it should be banned. I mean, you can still get it at a bookshop if you've got to have it, but it doesn't belong in a school library. And I don't think you think that either.
Oh, absolutely. So
where does the provincial government see the discussion?
Well, I understand that the provincial government has already noted these books to the school boards and, more importantly, to their superintendents. And it's most likely that these particular books are being taken off of the main shelves as we speak. But more are being produced every day. And there are still going to be activists trying to get their pet projects into school libraries. That's the concern of the provincial government at this point, not these particular books, but all of the books that we're concerned about.
Yes.
And not just the graphic novels either. How do we make decisions about what books belong on what school shelves? There's a much larger conversation taking place here. And when that's done, I'm sure it will serve as best practices across the country. We're just the first to notice the problem, confirm that it exists, and start to do something about it.
You see, I forget who it was. It might have been James Dobson who said, but somebody said years ago, don't ask me to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And it seems you were a little delicate about using the word pornography. You preferred sexually explicit. Fair enough. I may not be able to define it, but again, I know sexually explicit when I see it. And when you take the survey and you have a quick look at what the provincial government has put there for you to draw your conclusions upon, you're going to say, that doesn't belong. And why do we have to go through a process like this to determine what is kind of obvious?
Well, part of the question is whether the Minister of Education wishes to dictate all contents of all school libraries everywhere in the province, or whether he thinks that your local school board should have a hand in that. So that's part of the concern. I imagine he's also trying to avoid blowback. But underlying that concern, even if the minister was abolishing all school boards, there would still have to be some basic lines of where do we define this as starting. So clearly, sexually explicit materials should probably not be in any school libraries at any grade. But some things are also going to be inappropriate for junior elementary school beyond that. And they can't just go, this book is banned, because what about next week's book? It's brand new and it's on the shelves all of a sudden. That's the minister's concern.
I see. Well, I see it's a sticky one, but as I said, sometimes we seem to spend a lot of time. Somebody has to be responsible for what is permissible in school libraries, period. And you have written a number of articles in the past about how the education system actually works and who has input into it. Not everybody who seeks input into the education system, not everybody who runs for school board is necessarily working in the best interests of the children. Sometimes there are other interests that they represent, and you have written about this, so I get a little anxious when it is too far distributed. I think we're almost out of time, so I'm going to let you wrap up the argument for us, and then just tell us where to go to look at this survey.
The key problem here is that this is much bigger than the 10 books that the minister has identified. These are simply very obvious cases. We need to look at the broader problem as well. Where are we going to draw that line? One of my concerns is that there are a whole lot of people who are referred to as experts. They're bureaucrats. They're employed by schools or teachers' unions or by advocacy groups, probably by our tax dollars, and they are going to write articles. They're going to send in their own feedback. They're going to get every supporter they have to just overwhelm this particular public engagement so that the minister feels he has no choice but to kowtow to their demands. The only solution is for as many people as possible to get in on this survey and give this feedback. If you go to the Parents for Choice website or to articles that have been appearing in the Western Standard recently, you'll find links to this public consultation. It's also on the Department of Education's homepage. And we need everyone we can to go in and give reasoned feedback on this.
John, Parents for Choice in Education, in 15 seconds, what do?
What we do is we stand up for parents. Our object is to achieve educational excellence through maximum parental involvement.
What you have told us here this evening is staggering. It's that the federal government would be pushing something like this, and that they would find earnest, willing supporters who would then try to browbeat the government of Alberta into saying, yeah, it's okay if you want pictures of this kind of sexual activity in the school libraries where a 10-year-old can find it. I think a lot of people would just find this mind-blowing. I do. At least you and your colleagues in the Parents for Choice in Education are able to do something about it. So we are going to encourage the viewers, if they feel strongly about this, to find the survey. We're going to put it up on the screen here in a moment, where the link is. Or you can go to the articles in the Western Standard that have recently been published about this from Jen Hodgson and myself. And you can find it there and just click the link and have a look, say what you think, and you will have done a good thing. John, thank you very much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure to see you here.
Thank you very much, Nigel.
For the Western Standard, I'm Nigel Hannaford.